You stood there and reminded them that QPR were 1-0 up. Must be very brave to do that.
Well, it was, I'll tell you, I can't remember his name. He was a hero there, the fullback. And I was going past him all the time, taking and he was the hero of the whole of Millwall. That's why he was having to go at me. We got all sorts of threats. I can't remember his name now. Harry someone.
Harry Cripps.
That's it.
How good was Stan Bowles? It is a question that still divides opinion, even among the legends who played with him and against him. When he died in 2024 at the age of 75, the tributes poured in from every corner of English football. Don Shanks, his old Queen's Park Rangers teammate, ran marathons in his 70s to raise money for Alzheimer's research in Stan's memory. The club renamed the stand at Loftus Road in his honour. Fans still sing his name on the terraces. Dennis Law called him 100% skill. On paper, he was a genius, a player who could dribble past defenders like they were training cones. A player who could thread passes through the eye of a needle. A player who made 565 professional appearances and scored 127 league goals. But if you dig deeper, if you ask the managers who tried to work with him, the picture gets darker. Because Stan Bowles was not just a maverick, he was a man who walked out on England, who infuriated nearly every manager he played under, and who left scars on English football that no tribute could ever cover. This is the story of a flawed magician, told through the eyes of the legends who saw it all up close. We are going legend by legend, starting with the men who knew him best and ending with the manager who broke him completely. If you are enjoying this story so far, give this video a quick hype and help more football fans find it. Number 5. Tommy Docherty tried to sign Stan Bowles. The Doc was known for his brash personality and his own clashes with authority. He promised Bowles trust and freedom. He thought he could handle the Maverick. He had managed big personalities before. He believed his attacking style and his willingness to give players space would be enough to unlock Stan's genius. Docherty had a reputation for getting the best out of flair players. He thought Bowles would thrive under him, but Bowles saw right through it. His response became one of the most famous rejections in football history. "Tommy, I would rather trust my chickens with Colonel Sanders than trust you." It was funny on the surface. The line became legendary. Football fans still quote it today. But it was also a warning. It showed how deeply Bowles mistrusted anyone in a position of authority. He had seen too many broken promises. He had heard too many managers claim they understood him, only to try and control him the moment he signed the contract. Bowles had a simple philosophy: the secret to getting the best out of someone like me, just don't tell me what to do. In a professional sport increasingly built on tactical systems and strict discipline, that attitude was a recipe for disaster. Docherty walked away. Bowles stayed free, but freedom had a price, and that price was paid in medals he never won and managers who never trusted him. Number 4. Rodney Marsh was the man Bowles replaced at Queen's Park Rangers. Marsh was a showman himself. He respected Stan's style. He understood the flair, the entertainment, the way Bowles could light up a match with a single touch. Marsh had been a terrace hero in his own right. He knew what it felt like to play with freedom, to make the crowd gasp. But even Marsh recognized the truth. He saw Bowles as part of a generation that squandered its gifts. Marsh and Bowles were both mavericks, both loved by fans and mistrusted by managers. They represented a dying breed of footballer, the type who played for the joy of it rather than the structure of it. But the maverick culture was not a united front. It was a collection of clashing egos that could rarely be turned into a winning team. Marsh made it work at times. He found ways to channel his talent into success. Bowles never quite did. And Marsh knew it. He knew that talent alone was not enough when you refused to play by any rules at all. He knew that the 1970s game was changing. The old ways of individual brilliance were being replaced by systems and strategies. Bowles refused to change with it. Marsh adapted. That is why Marsh had a longer career. It is why Marsh earned more respect from the football establishment. Bowles remained on the outside looking in. Number 3. Jerry Francis and Dave Thomas were Stan's teammates at QPR during the 1975-76 season, and the club finished runners-up in the First Division. They loved him. They saw the genius every single day in training. They watched him do things with a football that seemed impossible. They saw him turn matches single-handedly. On match days, he was unplayable. But they also saw the chaos. Francis described Bowles as a happy-go-lucky type. who lives from day to day. It sounded harmless. It sounded like the kind of carefree attitude that makes a player fun to be around. But it masked a severe reality. Bowles would frequently disappear. He would fail to report for duty. One time, he overslept for a pre-season flight. Instead of facing the consequences, instead of calling the club and apologizing, hid in a friend's house. He stayed there for days. The police eventually listed him as a missing person. His teammates were worried. His managers were furious. Even at the height of his powers, he was considered a footballing scamp who spread art and confusion on the pitch and rancor in the boardroom. The managers at QPR, Gordon Jago and Dave Sexton, gave him more freedom than most, but even they struggled with his day-to-day behaviour. The most famous story came during a match, when the FA Cup trophy was displayed at pitchside. Bowles and teammate Tony Curry made a bet. Could they hit it with the ball during play? It was a ridiculous challenge, but they went for it anyway. Tony kicked and he hit it. I kicked it and I hit it. We dented the bloody thing. QPR won the match 3-0. Bowles scored twice. He played brilliantly, but the incident became a symbol. It showed his lack of respect for the institutions and trophies of the game. It was the same trait that would later destroy his relationship with Brian Clough. For Bowles, the FA Cup was not something sacred. It was just another target, just another game, just another laugh. Number 2. Don Revie was England manager after Joe Mercer. Revie was a master of preparation. He built his teams on meticulous dossiers and total player compliance. He would study opponents for hours. He would create detailed plans for every single match. He demanded control. He demanded that his players followed instructions to the letter. To Revie, Stan Bowles was the opposite of a reliable international professional. He was unpredictable. He was unreliable. He was a risk. Revie gave Bowles one last chance in a friendly against Holland in 1977. Bowles was isolated up front. The team was torn apart. The Dutch dominated. It was a humiliating performance. Revie watched and decided. He could not trust Bowles to reproduce his club form at the highest level. After that match, Bowles was permanently discarded from the national setup. 5 caps. That was all he ever got for England. In an era where England failed to qualify for successive World Cups, the omission of a player with his talent looked like managerial failure. Fans questioned it. Pundits questioned it. How could a player with Zidane-like close control be left out when England desperately needed creativity? But a closer look reveals the wounds were often self-inflicted. Revie did not trust him, and Bowles gave him no reason to change his mind. He turned up late. He ignored instructions. He played by his own rules. And Revie, a man obsessed with control, could not tolerate that. Number 1. The story that sums up Stan Bowles more than any other involves Mick Channon and Joe Mercer. It happened in 1974. Bowles had a history with Mercer. Back at Manchester City, Bowles had been involved in 2 fistfights with assistant manager Malcolm Allison. Allison was a maverick himself, a man known for his bold ideas and his larger-than-life personality. But even he could not handle Bowles. The fights were physical. They were brutal. They showed how little respect Bowles had for authority. Eventually, Mercer sacked him. Bowles believed Mercer always had a problem with him. That bad blood followed him. When Mercer became caretaker England manager, the tension exploded. During a match against Northern Ireland, Mercer substituted Bowles just 15 minutes into the second half. It was to give Frank Worthington his debut, but Bowles took it personally. He saw it as a slight rooted in their Manchester City past. He believed Mercer was punishing him. His response was extreme. Instead of travelling with the squad for the next match against Scotland, Bowles walked out on England. He headed straight to the White City dog track. Mick Channon, a close friend and fellow striker, tried to stop him. "You cannot do this to England," Channon pleaded. He knew what this meant. He knew the consequences. Bowles looked at him and said 2 words, "Watch me," and he left. That moment captures the central tragedy of his career. His loyalty was never to the institution, the badge, or even his teammates. It was to his own impulses. It was to the gambling dens of London. It was to a lifestyle that would eventually consume him. Channon stood there, watching his friend walk away from international football. There was nothing he could do. Bowles had made his choice, but the legend who delivered the most damning verdict was Brian Clough. In 1979, Stan Bowles joined Nottingham Forest. Forest were the reigning champions of Europe. They were built on extreme discipline, tactical simplicity, and the total subordination of individual ego to the collective cause. Clough and his assistant Peter Taylor had created a machine. Every player knew their role. Every player followed orders. Bowles was supposed to fit into it. He never did. From the moment he arrived at the City Ground, Clough began a campaign of psychological warfare. He disapproved of Bowles's lack of discipline. He hated the gambling. He hated everything Bowles represented. In a recurring power move, Clough pretended not to know Bowles's name. It was an attempt to knock the ego out of him. Bowles found it pathetic. He had seen mind games before. This was not going to work. Then came the tactical instructions. Clough pointed at Scottish winger John Robertson and told Bowles, "I want you to get the ball and give it to that fat fella over there." For a player who viewed the ball as his personal plaything, being reduced to a supply line was an insult. It was a fundamental attack on his craft. At QPR, under Dave Sexton, Bowles had been given freedom. He was allowed to roam. He was allowed to create. At Forest, Clough demanded strict positioning. He once told another player, "When I say play centre forward, laddie, you play centre forward." Bowles responded with a fuck-off attitude. He refused to conform. The training ground only made it worse. Bowles claimed that Clough and Taylor rarely participated in technical training. They delegated the work to Jimmy Gordon, a little Scots fella, while they just used to walk their dogs down the Trent. Bowles admitted Clough must have had something to achieve such success. He never saw it during his time there. The cultural clash was brutal. Bowles was a Londoner by adoption, a Mancunian by birth. Clough targeted him with regionalist insults. "You cockneys are all the same," he once shouted during a heated exchange. Bowles responded by singing London Calling by The Clash in the dressing room. It was his way of signalling he wanted out. It was his way of rejecting the Forest culture completely. After 5 months, the relationship collapsed. Clough dropped Bowles from the team. They stopped speaking. Bowles communicated only through messengers. Eventually, he walked out on the European Cup. It cost him a winner's medal in the 1980 final. A chance at glory gone. All because he could not bend. All because he refused to sacrifice his identity for a trophy. The gambling was at the heart of everything. It was not just a hobby, it was an addiction. Bowles admitted he only entered professional football because he thought he could earn more than working as a bookie's runner. His life became a litany of dog tracks, drinking dens, punch-ups, villains, gambling clubs, and bookmaker debts. In Manchester, he openly associated with members of the Quality Street Gang, a notorious underworld group. He admitted to taking a £1,000 bribe to throw a five-a-side match. The financial reward was 5 times what he would have earned for winning. He took it without hesitation. He did not see it as cheating. He saw it as survival. At the end of his autobiography, he wrote a line that summed it all up. "I have enough money to last me the rest of my life, provided I drop dead at 4:30 this afternoon. I also have a big mortgage to pay off, my bookies." It was funny, but it was also tragic. The chaotic lifestyle infuriated nearly every manager who tried to provide structure. Even late in his career, the pattern continued. He was persuaded to sign for Brentford with £4,000 in cash. He lost most of it at the dog track that same afternoon. The cycle never stopped. The addiction never loosened its grip. By the time his legs gave out, Stan Bowles had played 565 professional appearances between 1967 and 1984. He scored 127 league goals. He earned 5 England caps. On paper, it looks respectable, but for a player with his talent, it was a ghost of what might have been. Dennis Law was right. He was 100% skill, but skill was not enough. The system could not accommodate a man who refused to ask for permission. The institutions could not trust a player whose primary loyalty was to the next bet, the next thrill, the next escape. His final years were marked by decline. Alzheimer's afflicted him for 9 years before his death. The disease that steals memories took hold of the man who had created so many unforgettable moments on the pitch. Don Shanks ran marathons to raise awareness and funds. The tributes were touching. The stand at Loftus Road bore his name, but the overarching narrative remained one of wasted potential and self-inflicted wounds. He walked out on England. He infuriated managers. He left scars. Clough could not control him. Revie could not trust him. Mercer could not forgive him. Channon could not stop him. Even his teammates, who loved him, saw the burden that came with the brilliance. Stan Bowles once said, "I just played it for fun. I was not really bothered about making money from football." In living by that philosophy, he became a legend of the terraces, but an outcast of the history books. A cautionary tale of talent in the absence of discipline. The man who could pass a football better than anyone struggled to pass a betting shop with equal ease. And yet, fans still ask the question, how good was Stan Bowles? The answer depends on who you ask. If you ask the supporters at Loftus Road, he was a god. If you ask Brian Clough, Joe Mercer, or Don Revie, he was a liability. The truth is probably somewhere in between. He had the skill to be one of the greatest, but he lacks the discipline to stay on the pitch long enough to prove it. His career is a reminder that genius alone is not enough. The system rarely accommodates those who refuse to play by the rules, and Stan Bowles refused until the very end. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of football's most complicated legends, make sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. What do you think? Was Stan Bowles a wasted talent or a misunderstood genius? Let us know.
This was a famous incident at Selhurst Park where obviously Eric was abused from the touchline and he went in with a kung fu style kick. Where did that come from? Because that was a magical and slightly abstract moment for most of us.
I went to the court and I had 2 weeks of jails. Hundreds of journalists were there. I didn't want to speak to them. They can say anything, they can say whatever they want.
Oh, this is outrageous.
When Premier League legends were asked about Eric Cantona, how good was Eric Cantona? That question has haunted football fans for over 30 years now. Was he truly a king, or was he just someone who got a free pass? The critics filled the air with their doubts. They said he was lazy without the ball. They said he disappeared when tackled hard. They said he refused to track back and left his team exposed. They claimed he got special treatment that no other player received. They pointed to his failures in Europe and with France. His own teammates were annoyed by him. His own goalkeeper found him difficult to live with. And yet, despite all of that criticism, something extraordinary happened when Eric Cantona walked into a Manchester United dressing room in the winter of 1992. The entire Premier League shifted. Goals that were previously scored once a game suddenly came twice. The team's position changed from 8th place to 1st place in a matter of weeks. The club's 26-year title drought ended. So what was really going on? What did the legends who played alongside him and against him actually think? How could so many of them criticize him so heavily and still admit that he changed everything? That is the mystery we are going to solve today. And if you want to join us on this journey, make sure to give this video some hype so we know you are loving this story and want to hear more about football's greatest controversies and greatest legends. The world Eric Cantona entered in the early 1990s looked nothing like the Premier League we know today. English football was built on a foundation of physical power and directness. Every team played 4-4-2. Every match was about getting the ball into the mixer. This phrase meant launching the ball forward without any plan other than hope. This approach came from a very real place. After the Heysel disaster, English clubs were banned from European competition for years. That ban meant English football turned inward. Managers stopped worrying about playing beautiful football in Europe because they could not play in Europe. They only cared about winning at home, and winning at home meant being more physical and more direct than your opponent. Players were expected to run themselves into the ground. Every outfield player was supposed to defend. Every player was supposed to tackle. Every player was supposed to fight for every ball. Skill was secondary to effort. That was the English way. Then Cantona arrived at Leeds United in early 1992. He brought something the English game had rarely seen. He played as a second striker, or what some called a number 10. This meant he operated in the spaces between the opposition's midfield and their defence. Most English forwards did not understand those spaces. They were taught to stay wide or stay central. But Cantona floated between the lines. He pulled defenders out of position. He created space for runners like Ryan Giggs and Andrei Kanchelskis. He saw passes that other players simply did not see. He had vision that felt almost magical at times. He was not the most consistent goal scorer in the old-fashioned way. He did not score 25 goals every season by simply being in the right place. Instead, he was a scorer of great goals. Goals that changed matches. Goals that seemed to defy what was possible. He had the ability to strike the ball with such precision and power that defenders could only watch as it flew past them. He combined this with an aura around him, a presence that made teammates believe they could win any match. But this freedom to float and create came at a cost. and his teammates noticed every single moment of it. When Cantona finally arrived at Manchester United in November 1992, the club was struggling. They were averaging only 1 goal per game. They were sitting in 8th place in the table. Nobody believed they would win the title that year. Then something extraordinary happened. Within weeks, their goals per game doubled. They scored 2 for every 1 they had scored before. They won 18 of 26 matches. They lost only twice. They finished first. They broke a 26-year title drought. The Manchester United midfielder Paul Ince said that Cantona took the responsibility away from everyone else. The whole team could suddenly breathe. They could play with confidence because this one man seemed to have everything under control. This statistical transformation is the most powerful evidence of Cantona's impact. Whatever his flaws, whatever his critics said, his effect on the psychology and efficiency of a domestic team was truly unprecedented. Now, let us talk about what the legends actually said. Let us start with number 5, the player who perhaps saw the clearest double standard of all. Number 5 is Alan Shearer, the Premier League's all-time leading goalscorer. Shearer had a very specific complaint about Cantona. He said the media gave Eric a free pass for behaviour that would have ended the careers of other players. When Cantona attacked a spectator with a kung fu kick at Selhurst Park in 1995, he was convicted and banned for months. But the narrative quickly shifted. Instead of talking about the violence of what he did, journalists called him enigmatic. They called him philosophical. They quoted his poems and his thoughts on life. If Shearer had done the same thing, Shearer believed the media would have destroyed him, but not Eric. Shearer also had a personal story that illustrated this protection. When Sir Alex Ferguson wanted to sign Shearer from Blackburn Rovers, Shearer said he wanted to take over the penalty kicks from Cantona. He was the league's best goalscorer. He wanted the ball from 12 yards. Ferguson refused. He said, "Well, Eric's on them." Nothing would change Ferguson's mind. No amount of success elsewhere would convince him to give up on Cantona's special status. To Shearer, this meant that Cantona occupied a privileged position at Manchester United that no domestic player would ever receive. He was protected. He was favoured. He was given a status that was simply unfair. Number 4 is Graham Souness, a 3-time European Cup winner with Liverpool. Souness is one of the most prominent skeptics of Cantona's greatness. Souness argues that true elite status must be earned on 2 stages. First is the international stage, playing for your country. Second is the European Cup, the ultimate club competition. By those standards, Cantona's record is modest. His international career with France was marked by disappointment and discipline problems. He appeared at Euro 1992, where France failed to qualify from their group, which included Sweden, Denmark and England. France failed to qualify for the 1990 World Cup and the 1994 World Cup during his peak years. In European club competition, Manchester United often struggled against continental giants like Juventus and Borussia Dortmund. Souness points to Zinedine Zidane as proof that greatness should shine everywhere. After Cantona's suspension in 1995, France promoted Zidane to the number 10 role. France then won the 1998 World Cup. Manchester United later found success in Europe as well, but only after Cantona was gone. Souness believes that Cantona lacked the explosiveness and the mental strength to succeed at the highest level of world football. He was a big fish in a small pond. The Premier League in the early 1990s was not yet sophisticated enough to expose him. Number 3 is Vinnie Jones, the hard man of Wimbledon. Jones dismissed the King Eric persona as a fragile construction. Jones said that if an opponent tackled Cantona hard early in a match, the Frenchman would simply disappear for the rest of the game. Wimbledon's entire approach was built on physical intimidation. They wanted to disrupt rhythm and confidence through aggressive challenges. Jones believed Cantona could be bullied. The problem is that the evidence contradicts this. In a February 1994 match against Wimbledon, after taking several brutal tackles from Jones himself, Cantona responded by scoring a sensational volley. It was a technical masterpiece that highlighted his superiority. More than that, Cantona got straight back up after each foul. He was not intimidated. He was not bullied into submission. Yet Jones's critique reflects a broader belief that Cantona's brilliance was a fair-weather phenomenon. It flourished when he had space. It wilted under persistent aggressive man-marking. The problem with this argument is that few truly great players thrive when being consistently fouled and targeted. That is simply not how greatness works. Number 2 is Peter Schmeichel, Manchester United's goalkeeper. Schmeichel had one of the most persistent complaints. He said Cantona refused to track back. In the 1990s, when the opposition had the ball, every outfield player was expected to help defend. Schmeichel watched from his goal as Cantona would stand in the attacking half, doing nothing when his team needed to defend. This meant the defense was exposed. This meant more work for everyone else. Schmeichel described Cantona's refusal as a major frustration. But Schmeichel also noted something else. Cantona was moody. He was silent. He would withdraw psychologically from the group. Schmeichel said this made Cantona difficult to live with in a dressing room that valued vocal communication and collective effort. A goalkeeper needs to talk. He needs to organize. He needs his outfield players to hear him and respond. Cantona often did not respond. He was lost in his own world. For a goalkeeper trying to organize his defense, this was maddening. The lack of physical commitment, combined with the lack of emotional connection, made Schmeichel question how great Cantona really was. Number 1 is Roy Keane, who would eventually become Manchester United's captain. Keane was annoyed by what he called the special rules that governed Cantona's conduct. Everyone else followed the team rules. Everyone else dressed the way Ferguson demanded. At a civic reception where the squad was ordered to wear dinner suits, Lee Sharpe was reprimanded for wearing a flowery shirt. Cantona showed up in a blazer, jeans and a cap. Ferguson did not fine him. Ferguson did not lecture him. Instead, Ferguson said, "Yeah, but he looks fucking cool though, doesn't he?" At a film premiere, the dress code was black tie. Cantona wore a cream suit and Nike trainers. Ferguson praised the appearance as fantastic. Everyone else had to conform. Cantona could do whatever he wanted. Keane found this infuriating. He understood that Cantona's presence and aura were vital for the team's confidence. He understood that Ferguson believed protecting Cantona's artistic temperament was worth the cost. But Keane also witnessed Cantona's volatility. During a 1993 Champions League match against Galatasaray, Cantona's rage toward a Turkish police officer nearly provoked a larger riot. Ferguson had to physically restrain him. This was not the behavior of a player who deserved special rules. This was the behavior of someone whose talent was being used as an excuse for his problems. Yet Keane also acknowledged something crucial. Despite his annoyance with special treatment, Cantona's presence made Manchester United believe they could beat anyone. Now we come to the turning point that changed everything. In early 1992, Leeds United signed Cantona. Leeds were surging toward what would become the final pre-Premier League championship. But Howard Wilkinson, Leeds' manager, found Cantona incredibly difficult. Wilkinson valued discipline and tactical organisation. He said Cantona's lack of tactical discipline was a nightmare. He also said Cantona could not speak fluent French, which seems like a strange complaint, but reflected a deeper friction. Wilkinson preferred patterns. He preferred structures. Cantona was chaos. Wilkinson preferred workers who would run all day. Cantona would conserve energy. Eventually, Wilkinson made a decision. He sold Cantona to Manchester United for £1.2 million in November 1992. This crucial sale would change everything forever. Manchester United before December 1992 were a mid-table team. They had played 16 matches under different leadership, averaging 1 goal per game. They were in 8th place. Nobody expected them to challenge for the title. Then Cantona arrived and the transformation was immediate and dramatic. In the 26 matches after his signing, they won 18. They lost only twice. Their goals per game doubled to 2. They finished first. The title drought of 26 years ended. This is not coincidence. This is not luck. This is the measurable impact of one player on an entire team's psychology and clinical finishing. Paul Ince described it perfectly. Cantona took the responsibility away from the other players. He meant that Cantona was the star. He was the focal point. Everyone else could roll off him. Everyone else could play without pressure. The whole team was liberated. So we arrive at the central paradox that defined Cantona's career and legacy. To his teammates, he was an inspiration who revolutionized training and training intensity. Yet he was also moody and difficult. He refused to track back and left the defense exposed. To his rivals, he was mercurial and talented, yet also someone who could be bullied out of matches. He was protected by a media-free pass and by Ferguson's special rules. The evidence suggests that Cantona was the perfect catalyst for English football at a very specific moment in time. The Premier League was searching for a transition. It was moving from a purely physical game towards something more technical. It was becoming more globally marketable. It wanted to be sophisticated without losing its edge. Cantona provided that missing ingredient. He was technical enough to show that English football could be beautiful. He was still tough enough to fit the English way. He was not soft. He was not a luxury. He was essential, even if that essence came packaged with mood and volatility and a refusal to do the dirty work when the ball went away from him. His international career did not reach the heights it might have. His European record was not what his domestic dominance suggested it should be. These are legitimate criticisms. He had limits. But within the Premier League in the 1990s, within that specific context and moment in time, he was transformative. His 5 titles in 6 seasons speak to a dominance of the English game that few have matched in any era. He did not just play for Manchester United. He provided the aura and presence that allowed the club to transition from a legacy of decades of failure to a future of dominance. He did this even though that presence was often characterized by silence, by volatility, and by a refusal to put a shift in during rainy away days when the going got tough and the work got dirty. This is the real Eric Cantona. Not a king who could do no wrong, but not a fraud either. A player whose genius flourished in one time and one place, and who changed that place forever. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of football's greatest mysteries and greatest legends, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and drop a comment telling us your view on whether Cantona deserves his legendary status or not. Thanks for watching.
There's no danger I would not bring Roy Keane into the club. Like I say, it was a bit detrimental to me because then Ince and Keane sort of got into the midfield most of the time, but every now and again if they were suspended or injured.
When Sir Alex Ferguson and Gary Neville discuss the greatest captain they encountered, they mention one name that confuses younger fans who glimpse a fading player in early Premier League footage. How good was Bryan Robson? To modern eyes, he looks like a veteran midfielder whose legs had gone. Ask the architects of Manchester United's dynasty though, and you hear something different. They speak of him as the gold standard. Understanding Robson means understanding why 4 legendary voices place him at the pinnacle. Hit the hype button right now and help us share this story. Let's start with number 5. Gary Neville offers something quite unique and valuable. He was the direct beneficiary of everything Robson built throughout his career. Neville grew up in the Manchester United academy during the club's most chaotic period. The 1980s were brutal for United, the club finishing inconsistently, often mid-table. But Neville watched one player carry the entire institution. That was Bryan Robson. Neville describes him with one word: Titan. A Titan operates on a different plane from teammates. A Titan doesn't just play well, he defines standards for everyone. Neville watched Robson dominate through sheer force of will during years when United had no right to compete. This was one man holding everything together. Robson tackled ferociously, drove forward, arrived in the box to score, and dragged teammates towards standards they didn't know they could reach. Neville notes, this immense exertion during the 1980s explains why Robson's body was breaking down by 1992. Neville also calls Robson a bridge. Robson was the bridge between 2 eras of Manchester United. The era before Ferguson was unprofessional and chaotic. The Ferguson era demanded discipline and excellence. Robson existed in both worlds. He could be one of the lads while accepting Ferguson's standards. More importantly, he showed younger players you could maintain personality while pursuing excellence. When Giggs, Scholes and Neville came through the academy, they entered a dressing room where Robson still carried absolute authority. His standards became the baseline for the class of '92. Neville argues that without Robson steady during 1989 to 1991, Ferguson might not have survived to build the dynasty. Robson's loyalty bought the manager time to reshape the club. Number 4 brings an unexpected voice. Pep Guardiola represents everything supposedly opposite to Robson's style. Guardiola emerged from La Masia Academy, the Johan Cruyff School of Football, a philosophy built on technical precision and positional discipline. These values stand opposed to the English box-to-box tradition. Yet Guardiola cited Robson as one of his idols. This is a sophisticated football mind recognizing something profound. Guardiola's praise focuses on one detail: Robson's ability to arrive in the box at the perfect moment to score. This requires timing and intelligence about space. In Guardiola's philosophy, goals come from midfield runners arriving unmarked because strikers are occupied by centre-backs. Robson was a master of this. He would start a move in his own third and conclude with a header from the spot. This timing requires high footballing intelligence. Guardiola doesn't view him as a chaotic runner, but as a player of sophisticated understanding. Beyond tactics, Guardiola recognised the fighting spirit of English legends. Robson represented the noble warrior, a great fighter. For a young Guardiola watching English football from Spain, Robson embodied something the Spanish game prioritised less. You can trace a lineage from Robson's style to how Guardiola used Gundogan in Manchester City's title seasons. The instruction to appear at just the right moment echoes what Guardiola admired in Robson. This validates Robson not as old school, but as possessing timeless attributes effective in modern football. Number 3 is Roy Keane. Keane is famous for almost never offering praise. His standards are impossibly high. His critical eye misses nothing. Teammates, rivals, and even managers have felt the sting of his assessment. Yet, when discussing Robson, Keane speaks with reverence. He cites Robson as the only player he truly looked up to. This is the ultimate validation from someone who validates almost nothing. In his autobiography, The Second Half, and in various interviews, Keane describes Robson as his ultimate blueprint for what a Manchester United player should be. The modern game often compartmentalises midfielders into different specialised roles. Keane believed a central midfielder should do everything. Robson was the gold standard of that approach. Keane admired how Robson dominated from box to box, combining defensive tenacity, transition play, and goal scoring. His greatness was built on efficiency, timing, and competitive will, not spectacular tricks. This became the blueprint for Keane's own career. He modelled himself on Robson's template: dominate through positioning, work rate, and competitive intensity rather than flash or genius. The 1993/94 season was crucial. United brought Keane in as Robson's replacement, paying a British record transfer fee. Rather than viewing him as a rival to displace, Keane treated him as a mentor to emulate. He observed Robson's conduct on and off the pitch and modelled himself accordingly. He watched how Robson handled the era while maintaining elite performance. He saw how Robson remained one of the lads while commanding absolute authority. Keane describes him as skillful, strong as an ox, and utterly fearless. Keane's persona was partly constructed around this Robson archetype. Just as Robson would seize matches through force of personality and refusal to accept defeat, Keane developed that same mentality. In 1999 at Juventus, when Keane dragged United back from the brink in one of football's greatest individual performances, he was delivering his own version of what Robson had done consistently throughout his decade. Robson spent a career being that force. Number 2 is Sir Alex Ferguson, the figure at the centre of Robson's story. The relationship between a manager and captain forms the neural network of any successful team. For Ferguson, the definition of leadership was forged in the chaos of his early years at Old Trafford. This was a period defined by mediocrity, cultural stagnation, and a lack of silverware. The club was sleeping. Standards had collapsed. In this context, Robson was far more than a player. He was Ferguson's will made flesh. He was the standard Ferguson wanted to impose on an institution that had forgotten how to win. Ferguson called Robson the best captain he ever had. This statement carries immense historical weight. Consider that claim carefully. Ferguson managed Steve Bruce, a stoic and reliable defender. He managed Eric Cantona, charismatic and brilliant. He managed Roy Keane, probably the most ferocious midfielder in Premier League history. He managed Nemanja Vidic, a defensive colossus who won everything. And Ferguson said Robson was better in the captaincy role. This isn't about trophy counts. It's about something deeper. The ability to lead a team that has no right to compete and demand excellence anyway. Ferguson's admiration stemmed from what he called Robson's fearless desire to win. This wasn't just physical bravery, though his catalogue of broken bones and injuries testifies to that. He would contest headers he had no right to win and tackle players twice his size. He played through pain thresholds that would sideline modern athletes. This physical sacrifice galvanised teammates and modelled the commitment Ferguson demanded, but the fearlessness ran deeper. It was psychological. In matches where United were outplayed, particularly against the dominant Liverpool sides of the era, Robson would refuse to hide. He wouldn't wait for tactical instructions to change a game. He would seize the narrative of the match through sheer force of personality and competitive will. Ferguson saw this as the bedrock of everything he wanted to build. Robson's fearless desire to win set the standard for the 1990s dynasty long before trophies arrived. The mentality of the 1999 treble-winning side wasn't born in 1999. It was inherited from standards Robson had maintained and embedded during the barren 1980s. Ferguson's management of Robson during the 1992 to 1994 transition was a masterclass in man management and legacy preservation. By 1992, Robson was in his mid-30s, his body battered by a decade of fearless challenges and elite performance. The press and younger fans were saying his legs had gone, yet Ferguson kept him as captain. He understood something crucial. While Robson could no longer dominate box-to-box for 90 minutes, his presence in the dressing room remained essential. Robson was the bridge allowing winning mentality to transfer to the next generation. Ferguson used him selectively, preserving his energy for key moments, legitimising the rise of younger players like Giggs and Scholes. When Robson lifted the Premier League trophy in 1994, it was symbolic closure to an era. Ferguson had stewardship over his legacy, ensuring a decade of sacrifice was rewarded with the silverware he deserved. Modern analysis highlights a complexity in evaluating Robson. His all-action style can look undisciplined through 21st century tactical eyes. Modern football values positional structure obsessively. Players are assigned zones they must not vacate to ensure defensive stability and passing options. Viewed through this lens, Robson's all-action style can be interpreted as undisciplined. His style meant he was everywhere, tackling on the left wing, then sprinting to the right wing and charging into the opposition box. Critics, and even some former peers in candid moments, note that this occasionally left gaps behind him. If a central midfielder charges into the opposition box and the attack breaks down, the team is exposed to a counter-attack. In rigid positional systems, this would be considered a tactical error. The context changes everything fundamentally. The box-to-box midfielder is becoming an anachronism in modern football. Yet, in the 1980s, football was played fundamentally differently. Pitch conditions were worse, the game was more stretched, systems were far less compact and organised. In a 4-4-2 formation, which United played throughout Robson's peak years, the two central midfielders had to cover immense ground. They had to be destroyers and creators simultaneously. They had to solve problems for their entire team. Robson's relentless chasing wasn't indiscipline, it was necessity, born from the system and the limitations of available alternatives. It was the most effective way to play at that time. The trade-off between his occasional gaps and his overall impact was almost always positive. For every gap he left behind, Robson created 3 goal-scoring opportunities or made 3 match-saving tackles. His attributes made the all-action style genuinely effective, possessed the marking skills, positioning intelligence, and the stamina to dominate. He wasn't running without purpose. He was running to conquer space and impose his will on opponents. As the Premier League progressed through the 1990s, tactics progressively tightened and evolved. Positional discipline gained increasing value. Foreign coaches and Italian influences meant that holding position became more valuable than covering distance. This explains why Robson's specific style is rarely seen now. Not because he wasn't good enough for modern football, but because football evolved away from reliance on superhuman individuals compensating for structural deficiencies. Yet, Guardiola's comments suggest Robson's intelligence and footballing understanding have allowed him to adapt to any era and any tactical system. The 1992 to 1994 transition years represent a critical and very important aspect of Robson's entire legacy, historical perception. The timing of the Premier League's launch was unfortunate for his standing. By 1992, Robson was 35 years old. His body had been battered by a decade of fearless challenges, elite performance at the highest level. Younger fans tuning in to the newly branded Premier League saw a slower, less dynamic Robson, often injured. They did not see the Captain Marvel of the 1982 or 1986 World Cups. They saw a historical figurehead. This created a clear bifurcation in memory. To those who watched the 1980s, he is a god. To those who started in the 1990s, he is a legendary figure who lifted the trophy but didn't dominate the pitch. 1993/94 season was the definitive crossover moment and turning point in his career. Robson started fewer games, appearing as substitute or in cup matches. Yet, this season holds symbolic importance for understanding his legacy and place in United's history. He mentored Roy Keane during this period, passing on the nuances of the role. Even in decline, his influence remained palpable throughout the squad. His final league goal and the lifting of the Premier League trophy represented symbolic closure. When you ask Premier League legends about Bryan Robson, a consistent theme emerges quite clearly: reverence. To Ferguson, he was the foundation and fearless warrior who made the dynasty possible. To Keane, he was the blueprint, the complete footballer who proved you could dominate without tricks. Guardiola, he was the idol, the master of timing and space. To Neville, he was the titan, the bridge who carried the club through the wilderness years. The critique about his tactical discipline is valid, but context dependent. Robson played in an era that demanded Herculean individual effort rather than rigid positional discipline. His gaps were the price United paid for his omnipresence and his incredible impact. Ferguson was more than willing to pay that price. Ultimately, Robson's legacy suffers only from the accident of time. Had the Premier League arrived 5 years earlier, there would be no debate about his standing alongside Zidane or Keane. He remains the lost titan, player whose peak occurred in the shadows of the pre-digital age. His light guided Manchester United toward its golden era. He was the standard by which all future captains would be measured. Like this video if you think Bryan Robson truly deserves his place among football's all-time greats. Subscribe for more deep dives into football's greatest players and iconic moments. Comment below. Where would you rank Bryan Robson among the greatest midfield leaders ever?